Hi, this is Stan Dubin, and welcome to the Hiring Tips Podcast. So this is the third day, or the third show, of working with Suzanne Kelly. Suzanne, hello.
Hi, Stan.
And if you're coming into this podcast show and not having heard Suzanne's first two shows, they should just be just right there before this show, whether you're at iTunes, the website, Google Play, or wherever you might be getting this show. Listen to the first two shows because they do kind of run sequentially. You can certainly listen to this show without having heard them, but it would be more to your advantage to have those two shows under your belt. And what we were talking about in those first two shows, well, initially in the first show was some basic hiring mistakes and what is the benefits, the advantages, how effective reference checks employed by your company could give you a tremendous amount of really key quality information before you make that final hiring decision. And this is Suzanne's area of expertise. She's been doing it for over 20 years, and she amazes me in terms of what she knows.
Thank you,
Okay,
Steve.
You're most welcome. All right, so let's go to the first question. I know it might vary from company to company, but essentially how many references would you typically contact?
It varies from position to position, actually. So if it's in the C-suite, I'm speaking to about 12 different people, I would say 10 to 12 different people. Sometimes it might be more, but that's pretty much the average. If it's a mid-level position, it might be 7 to 8 people. If it's a lower level position, it might be 4 to 5 people, but I would never contact less than 4 or 5 references.
Okay. Just to make sure, you use that term C-suite. So just in case some of our listeners are not familiar with that term, what does that mean?
So it would be CEO, COO, CFO, CMO, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Marketing Officer, those types. You
mentioned getting off-list references. Let's go over what does that mean, off-list reference.
Okay, so there's two different types of references, suggested references, and those are references that have been suggested by the candidate. And the off-list references are the references that have not been suggested by the candidate. They're the ones that you can actually go out and find yourself. So you would do a little research to find out what, there are different tools that can be used.
Okay, good. I think that a number of our listeners and certainly a number of my clients might think that getting references to talk to beyond the ones that are listed on the resume, well, first of all, will these people normally give you additional people to talk to? That's question one. And then also question two, are there any stated or unstated permissions that you would need from the applicant?
Yeah, so what I suggest is full-blown transparency. And so the candidate should be fully aware that references are going to be checked, and there may be a possibility that will go off list, and it would explain to them what that would be. And do they have any issues with that? So if they have issues with that, then you want to kind of understand why. Why do they have a problem with that? Now, of course, as I said in our last segment, we're not contacting the current employer where the candidate is employed, right, because that could present problems. Right. But they should be fully aware that the reference checking process is taking place. And again, we should probably back up also, because I would never recommend anyone contacting only the references that have been suggested by the candidate that are listed on their resume. That should involve a conversation with the candidate in which it would be a collaboration between the employer and the candidate, where the employer would be driving the bus, not the candidate, which leads me to one of the top reasons why reference checking is really the elephant in the hiring process, is because most people have it an automatic, it's like a stigma that they have in their minds that, reference checking is a waste of time, for the simple reason that a candidate isn't going to give you the names of anyone that's going to say anything negative. So too many companies leave the process, the collection of names, of references, strictly in the hands of the candidate. And that's a big mistake.
Right. Now, you mentioned something a few minutes ago, which was very interesting. It's kind of a no-brainer that the person who's listing 3 references on their resume are not listing 3 people who hate them and are going to just tell your potential new employer that they're the most horrible people on planet Earth. They're going to be ideally either A, people they can be reasonably sure are going to speak well of them, or B, that they've actually gotten with ahead of time and said, I'd like to put you down as a reference for, this new company that I'm applying to, can I use you as a reference? And that's basically a statement meaning, can I use you as a reference with the idea that you'll speak well? And so that's a no-brainer that those 3 references are likely to be very good, spokes people for this applicant. Now, when you go off list and you want to get some additional names, like, and you mentioned this to me before we started the show, like, well, I'd like to speak to several managers of these earlier companies that you worked with. And if the applicant is reticent or even like, well, no, I would prefer that you didn't, well, that's not the best indicator, is it?
Well, it depends. There could be a reason. That could be a toxic manager. So there's always a reason behind things. And so it's a matter of, in this case, really understanding it. It's kind of like putting a puzzle together. So when you ask a candidate, okay, so you really want to collect at least 2 or 3 managers. You want to collect a couple of, if they were managing people themselves, you want to collect direct reports. You might want to collect heads of other departments. If they're a department head, then most likely they've collaborated with heads of other departments. And you want to speak to perhaps some high-level constituents. You want to get a really well-rounded view. So when you start talking to the candidate about the references and, okay, so these are the people that I'd really like to be speaking with. So who can you give me, and break it down. Go to each company. Who can you give me at this company? Okay, all right. You get the names and all the information. And who can you give me at this company? And you continue with that. So you should have at least 10 names by the time you're finished going through everything with a candidate. Now, if they can't give you anybody, or they can give you very few people, that could potentially be a pretty significant red flag that you want to address right then and there. That could even prevent you from going forward with the reference checking process. Because if they're not comfortable sharing names of people that they've worked closely with, then they might not be the right hire. And as I said in our last segment, A players typically will give you, if I'm asking them for 10, they'll give me 15 or 20. They'll give me anybody because they don't have anything to hide. And so you have to look at it and really kind of read in between the lines and make sure things are making sense, and that, if it's a common theme that you can't speak to a lot of people, that's probably a red flag. Now, if there's 1 or 2 you can't speak with, that's normal. That's always going to happen in all of our lives. So you have to really look at it from an objective standpoint, and you have to look at it very carefully.
Oh, and then you mentioned a term. I just want to make sure everybody understands the term. You mentioned A-list players?
Yeah, so an A player, so there's 3 different types of employees. The A players are the fully engaged superstars. They're the ones that drive innovation for companies. They make the best managers. They're your superstars. The B players are employees. They account for about 50% of the full-time U.S. working population. And they are basically checked out. They're sleepwalking through their day. They're not inspired by their company. They're not inspired by their managers. They're there to collect a paycheck. And the C players are, in plain English, they're toxic. And those are the ones you want to avoid like the plague. But let me just say this, Stan. The C players can be masterful. Not just them, but they in particular can be masterful at presenting themselves far differently during an interview than the person who actually shows up. Oftentimes when we're in reactive mode and desperate to get a seat filled, and then someone comes in who really wows us, and they are, they're really telling us everything they think that we want to hear, and they are like a dream come true. Those situations happen really oftentimes out of desperation to get the seat filled when you want to believe that that person is who you think they are. And then they end up wreaking havoc on your entire business and, can end up costing millions when all is said and done. So it's very dangerous to ever assume that someone is who you think they are. And that's why, even though reference checking it's a hassle, it can be very time consuming. But the investment of time on the front end can really save millions on the back end. And when you weigh the investment of that against the headache and financial burden and opportunity loss of a bad hire, it's negligible. So I always recommend, no matter how badly someone is sold on a candidate, never to skip the reference checking process. You would be absolutely fascinated at what people are willing to tell you. When you pick up the phone, contact them, make them feel comfortable, communicate clearly, and apply some empathy, it's absolutely fascinating what you can learn about people, and also by asking the right questions. Most bad hires happen not because of lack of technical skills. They happen because of a lack of a personality fit, lack of emotional intelligence, lack of coachability. It's poor culture fit. And so that's the main reason for bad hires. And so this is exactly why you want a reference check, because you want to find out, what kind of person is this? And when you let people talk and you listen, and you also listen to what they're not saying. How enthusiastically are they speaking about this person? Is there any hesitation when I ask a question like, would you ever work with this person again? If they hesitate for a second, you almost don't need them to answer that question. So you can learn a lot about a person just by interpreting the tone of the conversation and the way in which the reference is coming across.
Right. Absolutely. There's several questions more that I wanted to ask you, but we've gone well into the time. So I wanted to ask you, Suzanne, are you up for ending off here and doing one more show?
Sure, absolutely. I'm on a mission, Stan, to eradicate hiring mistakes. So however I can help your listeners to achieve that, they're really an epidemic in this country. So I am more than happy to do another show.
Excellent. Okay, folks, that's what we will do. We're going to get into, in this final show, I should hesitate to use the word final. You never know with Suzanne. But we're going to get into some really good tips on how to approach references and how to get them comfortable sharing important information about your applicant. I mean, I know a lot of people think, I thought this, that, oh my goodness, isn't it? And we're just going to put this there as a little bit of a teaser. Isn't it like potentially problematic for people to talk? I mean, aren't there legal implications? And folks, you're going to have to come back for show number 4.
Fasten your seatbelts.
So, and Suzanne will fasten your seatbelts, because Suzanne will answer those in depth. She disabused me of several things that I thought were the case with reference checks, but we'll cover those in the next show. So that's it for today, Suzanne.
Thank you, Stan. It was my pleasure.
Okay, folks. And then if you go to the website, you'll be able to get more information about Suzanne. And of course, you can go straight to her website directly, SuzanneKelly.com. That's Suzanne with 2 N's and Kelly with no E at the end, .com. Thank you for listening. In addition to our podcast, we have a service that will help you hire honest, trustworthy, and dependable staff. Watch our 3-minute video at thetestingservice.com. Once again, that's thetestingservice.com.